Hello my friends, today I'm going to talk about Trines, Sextiles, and Noviles in AstoLocality. I have up on the screen here Series 1.3, and I will describe my ideas on this. You are probably all familiar with, if you've been working in astrology and familiar with AstoLocality, Trines and Sextiles. So I guess the strange thing I'm throwing in here is Noviles. And astrologers have this tendency to throw in all kinds of new ideas, asteroids and minor aspects and all this stuff. And there could be a tendency to say, just slow down and stop throwing in all this stuff. But I'm going to show you some information why this may be something that's not so minor after all, or so trivial, and possibly worth your consideration to start including it. Okay, so I've entered a bunch of charts in here so I don't have to do it while I'm going through this, because I'm going to cover a lot of material. I have the actor Robert Redford's chart up there. He got married not too many years ago in Hamburg, Germany. So we could, well, he lives here, but I don't know if his wife is German or whatever, but for some reason they got married in some fancy hotel, castle or something in Hamburg. So it'd be interesting to see if that was a good place to get married, and we could relocate his chart, which I've done here. And if you look very carefully, this is his relocated chart. If you look very carefully, you might notice that Venus at 9 degrees Virgo 58 minutes is trine the midheaven. Actually, he was born with a Venus-Uranus trine in his chart, and Uranus is at the midheaven, and Venus is trine both Uranus and the midheaven fairly tightly. And if I go back to his natal chart and we look at an astro map for him in Hamburg, Germany, here's Hamburg, Germany up here, and this line is Venus trine the midheaven. The red lines with red lettering for the aspect is the midheaven, the yellow circle and aspect and the yellow line is to the ascendant. The midheaven lines are perfectly vertical. It may be hard to read on your reduced size on this video, but this is Hamburg, Germany, and Venus trine the midheaven going very, very close to Hamburg, so that would be good. Also, we have these we call treasure maps. This one is called the Love and Romance treasure map. It takes about 5 or 10 seconds to calculate because it does this very fine coloring to show you exactly the hot spots. And there's that Venus trine midheaven, which is picked up as being important for love and romance. Also, he happens to have Venus-Mars midpoint conjunct the ascendant. I'm going to talk about midpoints in a future video, but anyway, they're very important coming through here. And so this whole north-central part of Germany, well, actually most of Germany shows up as a hot spot for him, and so he got married there. So that would be, overall a good choice since it's highlighted in that place. So this is just to go over the idea that you're familiar with trines. I'll do a couple of other examples very quickly. Here's Jim Morrison, the rock and roll singer for the Doors. He went to Paris, and we can look at an astro map for him in Paris. This is an astro map with just aspects. And here's Paris, France, over here. And here's Sun sextile the midheaven, going very, very close to Paris, France. And amazingly, Sun opposition, the ascendant, coming in just south of Paris. So he's got Sun sextile the midheaven, Sun opposite the ascendant, both fairly close to Paris. If we look at his vocation and career map, what I call a treasure map, since the Sun is important for your personal expression and career, we see it picks up the Sun opposition, the ascendant, the Sun sextile, the midheaven, highlighted in red. The red is the real hot spot, and yellow is also good. And then if there's nothing, it means it's just not a hot spot for that. So France is a hot spot. Now we don't know if that would have proven to be true or not. He died shortly after going there. But just to show you the idea that we use trines and sextiles and how that looks. And by the way, if we look at his relocated map to Paris, of course we would see the sun on the 7th cusp. And here's the midheaven over here, very skewed houses at 15 Aquarius, and the sun very tightly sextile at 15 Sag. So you see the same thing in the relocated chart as in the chart. And one more example, Pamela Corson, I guess you pronounce her last name. She was a girlfriend of Jim Morrison. She went to Paris a few weeks before him, and then he went there to meet them, and to meet her, and they were going to set up there for some period of time. And she has Moon trine the midheaven, going right through Paris, almost exact. And we have a map called the Friendship and Family Map, and it will pick up things like moon trines and so on. And there it is, Paris, France, great place for home and family. Well, it didn't prove to be so great because Jim died shortly after they got there, but theoretically that this would be a good, for, overall, if things, if that had not happened, it would have been a good place. So anyway, we use trines and sextiles, of course, in astrology. Now, interesting thing about Paris turning out to be a disaster for them, it's interesting to look at their composite chart, and you can actually do an astro map of the composite chart. And here's an astro map with just the basic aspects and conjunctions and oppositions, and going right through Paris. This is an astro map of the composite of Jim Morrison and his girlfriend Pamela Corson. Saturn is conjunct the composite ascendant, going right through Paris. Here's a map we call Responsibility and Focus, which is about Saturn, and Saturn conjunct the ascendant, showing Paris as extremely Saturnian. And I would say, and astrologers would say, that these are places where you need to get serious, you need to get mature, and if you don't, you pay. You pay the price if you're fooling around. And they were still fooling around with drugs and things like that, and paid this Saturnian price of death for that. And the story is that she was involved because she was the drug user more than he was. We don't know all the details, but anyway, from looking at the composite chart, that would make sense. Okay, so the relocation of the composite chart is something I recommend you check out. I've been using it for years. It does work very well. And this is probably one more example. There's some tricks, by the way, some technical astronomical problems with how do you relocate a composite chart. The composite chart doesn't have a date and time unless you're doing what we call the Davison composite. But this is not the Davison composite. It's the midpoint composite chart. Anyway, there's some astronomical complexities, and over the years I've been wrestling with that. And this particular way of doing it seems to work very well, and this would be one example of it. Okay, so we use trines and sextiles, of course, in astrology, and here's a creative idea that you could relocate the composite chart and get some useful information out of it. And by the way, if we relocate the composite chart to Paris, of course, we would see, there it is, Saturn exactly on the ascendant. Saturn 15 Cancer 51, and the ascendant 15 Cancer 55 is going right through the city. Okay, so there's an idea for you. But what about this novile idea? Could they possibly be important? Well, let's first go over what a novile is, and I have some little pictures for you. Here's an image to help you get a sense of what noviles are. If we take a point, I just took an arbitrary point, it's 10 degrees of Aries. The trine points, of course, would be 10 degrees Sagittarius and 10 degrees Leo. So these three are exactly trine each other. The noviles take the trine and split those in thirds. So you have 120 degrees and you get 40, 40, 40. So from 10 Sagittarius, you'd go to 20 Capricorn, to 0 Aquarius to 10 Aries. From 10 Aries you'd go to 20 Taurus. So there they are. We've divided them into 3 pieces. So these are your novile points to each other. If I happen to start at 10 degrees Aries as one of my points, you have 9 novile points. So you're trining the trine, you might say. You're taking the trine and splitting it in 3. 9 is 3 times 3. So those are novile points. They're considered to be minor aspects. Most modern astrologers don't use them. But noviles, in a way, are the basis for the Navamsa chart in India, and an Indian astrologer practicing what we call Vedic astrology. Also, astrologers in the West also practice Vedic astrology. Can't do anything without looking at the Navamsa chart. So in some traditions, this 9-based system is not so minor. It's very major. So could noviles be important? I have found that they are, but let me show you another diagram. Boink, a lot of information here. This is, what I'm showing you is how you might use noviles in relocation and what we're actually talking about. Here I've taken 0 Aries, the beginning of the zodiac, and 0 Libra. Suppose someone had 0 degrees Aries rising, and therefore 0 degrees Libra setting, and we're looking at aspects to the ascendant, 0 Aries, or the descendant, 0 Libra. Well, the trine and sextile points you're already familiar with. Here we go up and I put 60 degrees. This green line would go to 0 Sagittarius, and that would be sextile the 7th house cusp, and simultaneously it's trine 120 degrees to the ascendant. And similarly 0 Aquarius. So we have, would be trine the 7th house cusp, sextile the ascendant. Here I have the same exact thing. I just didn't put the numbers in. So, it's less busy looking, but it's just, you'd have like a mirror image of what's at the top. Okay, so we know what the green lines are. The blue and red lines are the noviles. So again, we're taking these trine areas and we're putting additional equally spaced points. What you end up with is a point every 20 degrees. So if I start at 0 Aries and I go backwards, because I've got my numbers up here, so I go backwards 20 degrees up to 10 Pisces, that would be 160 degrees from the 7th house, right? Because 160 plus 20 is 180. Well, 160 is the 4/9. That's 4/9 of a circle. If you calculate that out, you'll see that that's true. It's 4 times 40. So if I go back 20 degrees, I've got 4/9 the 7th cusp. If I go back 40 degrees, I'm 1/9. The 40 is 1/9 the ascendant, which ends up being 140. Now I've put this in a thin line because the 140 is not a novile aspect. It's not a 1/9, a 2/9, and so on. So this point here is, which would be what, 20 degrees Aquarius, is 1/9 or 40 degrees to the ascendant, and doesn't show up as any kind of novile to the 7th. So I've got 20, 40, 60 becomes the sextile and the trine. So 20, 40, 60, 80. I've put in blue the noviles to the ascendant. So 40 and 80 is 2/9. If I go to 100, 100 to the ascendant is 80 to the 7th. So that's 2/9 to the 7th. So the bottom line here is that the blue lines are noviles to the ascendant, and the red lines are noviles to the 7th house cusp. And you end up with a point every 20 degrees. So starting from 0 Libra, we'd go 20 degrees, we have 4/9 the ascendant. We go up another 20 degrees, we have 40 degrees, which is 1/9 the 7th house. Then we have a sextile, and then we have a 9th, 2/9 to the 7th, and so on. So every 20 degrees you're getting one of these aspects, and the noviles are similar to trines and sextiles. They're soft. So these are all soft sweet spots, every 20 degrees. So instead of having a soft sweet spot every 60 degrees, well, every 60 degrees, 60, 120, 60, 120. Instead of every 60 degrees, you have more sweet spots. Isn't that good to know? Every 20 degrees. That would be the idea. So here's your aspects. 40 degrees is 1/9, 60 is 1/6, the sextile. 40, 60, 80 is 2/9, 120 is 1/3. But the 20 degrees is 160 to the opposite cusp. So you end up with every 20 degrees being a nice sweet spot, you could say. And if the aspect is to the ascendant, you have relationships. If the aspect is to midheaven, you might say you're in your zone, as they say in sports, or you're in your element. You're in that spot where you feel right and you can express yourself. And the ascendant's more about relating to others. And if it's moon, it's more about heritage, family, clan. If it's Venus, it's more about sweetness, beauty, attraction. So you have these aspects not only to the ascendant, but to the midheaven. So is it true that these additional spots, taking the trine and splitting it in thirds to get these additional spots, has any effect? Well, I'm going to show you some indications that perhaps it does. I'm convinced of it myself, as much as you can be convinced of anything, I guess, in astrology. But let's look at it and see what the evidence is. First of all, to give you an idea, let me show you an example in my chart. I didn't discover this, by the way, with my chart. The way I discovered it, I go to conferences and have a booth there with our software, and people came up and they said, "What's different about your chart, about your software?" And I'd show them different things. And sometimes I show them these treasure maps, and I'll show you one for me, the friendship and family. And so I show these friendship and family maps, and people would come up and they would say, "Oh, I live on that yellow line." And they would just say, "That's interesting, I live on that yellow line," because typically I do it of the whole United States or the whole world, and they'd say, "I live on that yellow line." And I would notice the yellow line would be one of these noviles. Here it says Venus 140. Well, that means Venus is 140 to the midheaven, means it's what to the fourth house cusp? 40 degrees, right? So those round number angles are actually noviles. So 140 the midheaven. I go back to my diagram. Well, I don't have the midheaven drawn here, but same idea, principle applies to the ascendant. This would be 140 degrees here. Looks like this 140. I didn't write it in here, but anyway, the 140 degrees there means that we're. No, what am I saying? 140 degrees. No, I am right. 140 is the soft one, means you're 40 degrees is the solid one going to the ascendant. So 140 and then 40. So it's 40 degrees. Good boy, I made that sound complicated. Sorry for getting tongue twisted there. But the idea is that that's 40 degrees the fourth house, so that's important. Now, it doesn't go right through where I live. I live in Gainesville, Florida. I moved from up in New York down here. But interestingly, every time something big happens to me, it happens a little bit after my house cusps. And I believe I was born closer to 428 because the big events always happen when the outer planet is a little bit after my ascendant, 7th house and midheaven, 4th house, angular house cusps. And I can go to here to time adjust, and if I go forward 1 minute, oh, well, you know what, this is a little bit slow doing this. Well, it's a little bit slow. It takes 10 seconds every time. It's faster to do this with the regular map. But there I am at 427, and look how close the Venus is there. I'll click one more time. It's faster to do this time adjust with a regular map. I'll show you that because it takes a little while to draw these fancy treasure maps. But at the 428, where I think is the time I was born, now Venus is going almost directly through Gainesville, confirming what I've been suspecting the whole time. Anyway, I've never looked at my these aspects in my chart until people in the conference said, gee, I'm on that yellow line. Now, if I had the 428 time and somebody showed me, I'd say, gee, that's interesting, I'm born on that yellow. And it was always yellow because we don't weight the noviles very strong. We weight, like, see, the sextiles are redder because we give them more points for being a sextile. But actually, if noviles are so important as I think they are, this should be giving more points, which would make it redder. The darker it is, the more points it has, a heavier weight, you could call it. So I'll cancel out of this, and then I'll show you the just lines. Oh well, that's just anyway. That just shows you that without the minor aspects, without the noviles, I don't have anything going on in Gainesville. And so I've lived here, for since I'm 22 years old. For 40 years I've been living here, very comfortable. And that's what you find with these noviles to the Moon and Venus. So what I'm saying is, going back to this diagram, if you're in a place that's one of these multiples of 20 degrees from the ascendant or midheaven with your Moon or Venus there, if your Moon or Venus is one of these multiples, you feel very comfortable. I call it the alienation buster. You don't feel so alienated in the spots. You just flow into it and it feels comfortable. And the Moon will emphasize more heritage family, and the Venus more of a sweetness beauty, ascendant more relationships, midheaven more being in your zone. So in my case, that Venus on to the midheaven axis would be I'm in my zone in a Venusian way, which subjectively makes 100% sense to me. Here's my chart relocated to Gainesville, and it's not obvious what's going on because here's my Venus at 14 degrees Taurus, my relocated midheaven at 23 Sag, that happens to be very close to being 160 degrees, and if I was actually born at 428, as we saw on the map, it pulls this over to 24 Sag, making it almost exact. So these noviles are difficult to see because they're not the same degrees like the normal aspects, but it might be that because we visually like to look at things in the same degree, it's easier for us to see. Maybe we're a little bit biased in our perception. It tends to make us miss these noviles, which maybe are more important than we think they are. So what I did, among other things, besides using these with clients, hundreds and hundreds of people, and seeing that it works, I've also did a little study, because this is one of the things we don't do enough of in astrology. We just rely too much on people that we happen to interact with and, try to draw opinion, or conclusions about things that are very difficult to conclude, very subjective information. We don't usually use very measurable things. So what I did is I interviewed 8 people. I have where did these 8 people came from? They came from a list of people in a group that I was a member of. I was on the board of directors for the ESAR, the International Society for Astrological Research, and I had a list of members with their birth data, and there were 8 of them that I had the data for. And I ran the relocated chart because most of them had been living in a place comfortably for some period of time, which is what the Moon and Venus do. If you've been living in a place for a long time, feels comfortable, a good chance you have Moon or Venus in one of these novile aspects. And here are the results. It was rather dramatic. 3 of the people had not relocated. 3 who did not relocate, I'll highlight this, they lived where they were born, as many people do. I used a 100-mile radius. There were 3 who were within less than 50 miles of where they were born, and the other 5 had relocated. They had no novile aspects of Moon and Venus, ascendant in midheaven. None of those 3 do. By chance, only about 1 in 4 people does. So out of those 3 people, it was about what we would expect randomly. Nobody had it. So if you don't relocate, I feel I'm concluding that you're already in a power zone because you're in your element. You don't have a relocated chart that's very different. You're consistent, clear, and simple by staying where you were born, which also psychologically makes sense. You haven't gone out to adapt to some new environment, either physically or astrologically. And then of the 5 people who relocated, here's the results. 4 out of 5 were on those lines. And interestingly, there were 4 females and 1 male. All the females moved to a moon line. One is moon 160 degrees. That's the 4/9 the midheaven, within less than a degree. Another one was 100 degrees. From the ascendant, 100 means 80, which is 2/9, from her 7th house. The male has the trine aspect, Venus trine the midheaven. Another female had moon 40 degrees midheaven. And then the 5th one's the only one who did not have moon or Venus in one of these angles. Her moon was 80 degrees from the midheaven, but it was about a 2-degree orb. So it was way out of orb. But interestingly, and that's a female, also moon, the 3 previous places she lived all had moon or Venus within 1-degree orb. Novile, sextile, or trine, one of these 20-degree multiples, all within 1-degree orb, which happens by chance, as I said, only about 1 in 4 times, and all 3 previous places. And she said she liked those places very much, and she's not so happy with where she's living currently, which she says is because it's gotten busy and crowded and so on. But interestingly, she doesn't have the aspect. And this fellow here, you might say, well, he has Venus trine midheaven, maybe that's why he lives there. He's an astrologer who doesn't particularly use or even believe in this relocation astrology. So it's definitely not the reason why he was living there for so many years. So a controlled study like this, where we don't get to select people and control for what we're doing, this doesn't prove anything, it's a very small group, but these are the kinds of things we don't do enough of astrology to see if our ideas are really making sense. This doesn't prove anything, but it's a step. The idea is not to go from one extreme to another. Now we're going to try to have to prove everything. They don't do that in the social sciences. You tend to make incremental steps, little steps forward to double check, to question what you're doing, to control for selection bias and so on. So there you go. The idea is that, going back to Sirius here, that these noviles are very important. And I'll give you one example of a famous person who has that, which is a baseball player, Roger Maris. So there's Roger Maris. He was popular for hitting a lot of home runs and setting a record for home runs. And he and Mickey Mantle, along with a lot of other great baseball players, helped the New York Yankees win lots of championships and World Series and so on. So anyway, one reason I was interested in Roger Maris is he had moved to the same town I moved to Gainesville, Florida, which is not a place people usually move to. It's South Florida on the beaches is where everybody seems to move. But anyway, he happened to move here. Apparently his mom, I guess, had moved here. I'm not sure why, and then he moved down. Of course, he's died years ago, but he lived here in what's now my hometown of Gainesville, Florida, so I thought that was interesting. And so he moved down, and sometimes people don't live on Moon-Venus lines, by the way, these moon soft spots. They may live somewhere where they're creative, they're artistic, their art is emphasized, or their career. Some people move I've seen people with their Sun or Mars are in these soft spots, and their community action. One fellow, for example, I remember is a volunteer fireman and so on. But the Moon, Venus are these soft, sweet spots. If the place happens to appeal to you, the demographics, the climate, the lifestyle, the culture, plus that, it really works out well. You can't just use the astrology. So anyway, we take Roger Maris and let's look at his a map where we can just put in the minor aspects. This is a feature. I can show you how you do it in series, but you can add in just the minor aspects. And there's Moon 80 degrees, which is the binovile going right almost exactly through Gainesville. And his Sun and Mars also nearby. But there it is. His mom moved down here. He moved down here. His kids grew up here. His kids still live here. Family, family, family. Moon 80 degrees. If we didn't have these minor aspects here, of course, I think I've got an example of that. It doesn't really show anything Neptune, semi-sextile to midheaven. So it fits what happened. It fits his lifestyle. He started a business here that did well, and his family continues to live here. And And if we do his friendship and family map, again, these treasure maps take 5 or 10 seconds to calculate, so you got to wait a little bit because it does all this fine shading stuff. There it is, friendship and family. And again, when I'm showing this to people, they say, "Oh, I live on that yellow line." Well, if these are as important as I think they are, we can go in and customize the program and give it more weight, because this is really, in my opinion, the really important one. And this moon, I know this is going with this one because it's the yellow line, which is curving over the ascendant. This happens to be Venus, also another nice spot for him. But which is a Venus line to midheaven, but he had moved to the moon line where his mom was a family member, moon mom, right there in Gainesville, where very few people happen to move. But the magnetism was there, and it worked out. So, and if we look at his relocated chart, where am I here? Roger Maris natal. I didn't run it. I can run it really quickly. I can say, give me a relocated chart to Gainesville, Florida. I thought I ran everything I was going to show you, but the moon at 7 degrees Libra, that happens to be 80 degrees from the 27 Sagittarius ascendant. You wouldn't notice that. You wouldn't think it's important. You would think it's trivial. But maybe we don't know everything, and maybe the Vedic astrologers are onto something with their 9-base system. So these are sweet spots, and that's exactly what happened for him. Okay, so you're getting this idea of different things you can do with relocational astrology, different possibilities, and ways of getting in there and looking at things. And I was going to show you one more thing, and then I'll end this video. This thing here is called an Asteroid Astro Map. If I right-click, there's a thing we call Asteroid Map, and I'm thinking of changing the name of it in future versions to Customized Map, because we first developed it to do asteroids, but now we're developing it. If I click on Select Asteroids and Aspects, what I can do, or what anybody can do, is you can select all these different asteroids, and you can select what minor aspects you want, or major aspects. So we're developing this to be a simple customizable thing, and by selecting the Noviles, binoviles, quad noviles, the 3 novile aspects, I can see a map with just those. It's very nice, customizable, just put in whatever you want to see there. Okay, so there you go. Trines and sextiles, which you knew about for astro maps or for anything, but maybe noviles are important. Yeah. On the other hand, I know people are reluctant to adapt new ideas, but what I've shown you is that in incorporating new ideas, we can do more than just look at charts randomly. We can, even with a small group like that, we can test it and analyze it critically, and I'm convinced that these things are important. And also the idea of relocating your composite chart. So a few new ideas, a few new tricks. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you might find that useful. I'll sign off here. Take care. Namaste.